Hi everyone, welcome back to the Behind the Scenes series. Today, I'll walk you through this time lapse on the sales team's dashboard. If you'd like to see the dashboard in action, click the link above to explore its full functionality. All the resources are available for download in the description, so you can follow along step by step. Now, let's dive in and start building with a blank Power BI file. First, we'll bring in our data from Excel. Select the file. Choose the required worksheets. Agent, Product, Region, Sales, select FY, Team, and click Transform Data to enter the query editor. Power BI did not detect the row headers for product and region tables. To manually correct this, click on Use First Row as headers for both tables. Next, instead of creating a new calendar table, we'll reuse an existing one by copying the dim date table from the template and pasting it into this file. Once done, click Close and Apply to load the data. With the data loaded, let's move over to the model view to verify relationships. While Power BI automatically detects relationships based on matching fields, it's important to verify them. After that, drag and drop the date fields to create the relationship between the dim date and sales tables. Now, let's shift to the report view to start designing our dashboard. We'll first add a custom background. Open the Format pane, go to Canvas Background, select an image file, and adjust the transparency to 0 so that the image displays in full clarity. Next, we'll add the colored shapes behind the selectors. Under the Insert ribbon, choose Shapes and select a rounded rectangle. Format the shape for size and adjust its position to where the filter will be placed. Then, adjust the fill color to match the theme. And turn off the border. Duplicate this shape for the other selector. Resize and position it accordingly. Duplicate this shape again for the sales variants. Resize and reposition the new shape. And update the shape fill color. With that done, we'll work on the dashboard title. Go to the Home ribbon, insert a text box, and set the font size to 28. Type Sales Team's Dashboard, then highlight it to change the font style. And color Sales Teams in gray. And Dashboard in black to match the color theme. Adjust the text box size and position. Then remove the background for a polished look. Moving on to data preparation, let's add the Team ID column to the sales table. First, navigate to the table view. Select New Column and input the DAX formula to retrieve the Team ID from the Team table. While we're in the table view, let's ensure the Fiscal Month field sorts correctly. Select Fiscal Month. Click Sort by Column, and choose F month number to maintain proper chronological order. Back in the Report view. Expand the Build pane, we'll insert a slicer for fiscal year selection. Add Select FY to the data field, rename it for clarity, and open the Filter pane to exclude FY 2021. Now, we'll format the slicer. Adjust its size and position it to the top right corner. And remove the background. Modify the slicer settings to drop down and enable single select. Then proceed to update the header font type, adjust the font size to 10, and change the font color. For a uniform look, also update the value font type, as well as the font color to black. Now, let's organize our measures by creating a dedicated table. Click Enter Data. Name it Measure Table, and click Load. Once created, right-click the measure table and create a new measure for sales. Then, proceed to delete the unnecessary column 1 to keep the table clean. We'll now proceed to create the initial set of measures for this dashboard. To keep things concise, I'll fast-forward this part, but all the DAX formulas are available in the BI template for reference. Once completed, let's add a parameter for the benchmark selection. Go to Modeling, select New Parameter, and choose Fields. Select the relevant measures. Select Budget, select Forecast, and select Last Year. Rename each of them appropriately. And click Create. Next, we'll format the slicer. Resize the slicer, adjust its position, and remove the background. Update slicer settings to drop down and enable single select. To match the FY slicer, set the header font size to 10, adjust its color to gray, as well as update the value color to black. With that in place, let's structure the dashboard with section headers. Duplicate the shape used for the sales variance. Resize the new shape and reposition it. Then under Shape Style, change the fill color to yellow. Create another one by duplicating this shape. And reposition it for the next section. Continue this process for the detailed view section. Once that's done, repeat the same steps for the regional section. Finally, apply the same approach for the sales trends section. Next, we'll proceed to work on the headers. Insert a text box. Set the font size to 14 and enter Overview. Adjust its size, position it at the first section, and turn off the background. Duplicate this text box, position it to the middle section, and enter Team Analytics. Continue by duplicating the same text box again for the next area and update the content to Detailed View. For the next label, duplicate the text box once more, increase the width slightly to accommodate the longer title, and change the text to Sales Performance across cities. Lastly, repeat the process for the final section, move it to the area above the line chart, and update the label to Sales Trends over time. After that, let's add another parameter for toggling between product and agent. Return to Modeling, select New Parameter, and choose Fields. Select the two measures, Product Name and Agent ID. Once selected, move to the pane on the left side to rename them. And click the Create button. After finalizing the setup, convert this visual into a button slicer. Resize it and place it in the Detailed View section. Adjust the top and bottom padding and remove the background. After turning off the title, return to remove the top padding. For slicer setting, activate Force Selection. In the layout, set max rows to 1 and columns to 2. For the callout values, reduce the font size to 11 and align the text centrally. Customize the button by setting the padding to custom to adjust its top and bottom padding and changing its fill color. This will define how the button appears by default. Once that's done, switch over to the hover state and change the fill color to white. Next, we'll return to create the remaining measures. Right-click the measure table, select New Measure and input the formula. Once again, I will fast-forward this, but you can get all the DAX formulas in the BI template. With our measures in place, let's build the first visual. Insert a new card visual and add Select Actual to the data field. Rename it to Total Sales. Format the card by first adjusting its size and its position. To keep the design clean, set the top and bottom padding to 0 and remove the background. Under Callout Values, go to Label, change the position to below value, and reduce the space between label and value to 0. Then, select the Total Sales series and update the value decimal places to 1. For the card setting, adjust the padding to custom, and again, remove the top and bottom padding to keep things compact. Disable both the background and border too. Now that the total sales card is set, let's add another visual to display the variance percentage. Instead of creating a new card from scratch, duplicate the total sales card for consistency. Replace the data field with variance %, then resize and reposition it accordingly. For better visibility, let's adjust the callout values. Reduce the font size to 14 and align the text centrally. For the label, reduce the font size to 10. To make this label dynamic, select Variance % Series, click on FX, and choose Label as the field to base it on. This ensures that the variance updates dynamically as the data changes. Next, we'll set up a card to display the total number of teams. Again, to maintain a consistent style, duplicate the total sales card, replace the data field with select team count, and rename the field name to teams. Then resize and reposition the card so it fits neatly into the layout. Format the values by reducing the font size to 42, changing the label color, and updating the layout to top align. To enrich the card details, let's incorporate a year-on-year comparison. We'll use the reference labels for this. Start by adding team variants, then change the series to all. Disable the title, and under value, reduce the font size to 10 and change the color to a darker one. For the divider, adjust the transparency to 100, line style to dashed, and uncheck ignore padding. Then, modify the layout vertical alignment to middle. In the spacing setting, reduce the space between labels to 0, and activate Customize Outer Padding to set padding before divider line to 16, and padding after divider line to 0. Lastly, update the card's padding by adjusting the left padding to 12 and top padding to 4. Now, let's add one last card visual to display the total number of agents. Just like before, duplicate the team's card, replace the data field with select agent count, and rename it to agents. Adjust its positioning within the dashboard to keep everything aligned. To include the year-on-year comparison for agents, go back to the reference labels, select the series agents, and add agent variants. This will automatically display the year-on-year performance for the total number of agents, making it easy to track trends over time. Now that our key metric cards are in place, let's move on to the team analytics visual. To begin, insert a line and clustered column chart. Add team name to the x-axis, parameter to the column y-axis, and add select actual to the line y-axis. Next, enhance the tooltips by adding both select actual and variance text for additional insights. To improve clarity, rename these fields to more meaningful and user-friendly labels. Once that's set up, take a moment to carefully adjust the chart's size, as well as position it to fit neatly within the layout. Remove the background too. For clearer insights, let's turn the chart title into a dynamic summary line. Click on FX and select Label 2 as the field to base the title on. Then customize the appearance by adjusting the font size to 11, updating the color to dark gray, and reducing the spacing to 0 for a crisp, polished look. Now, turn off the X-axis title since the team names are self-explanatory. For the Y-axis, disable both the value and title to declutter the visual. On the secondary Y-axis, enable align zeros to ensure consistent scaling between the columns and the line. Then, toggle the value on and off to ensure it doesn't appear on the chart. For the legend, reduce the text font size to 9 and turn off its title. For the columns, set the bar color to gray. And under layout, increase the space between categories to 35% to create a balanced look. In the line settings, reduce the width to 0 and change the color to black for better contrast. To display the actual sales, we'll use the error bars. Enable this options, then assign the field select actual to the upper bound and 0 to the lower bound. To make the bars stand out, customize the setting by changing the bar color, setting the width to 10, and adding a black border with a size of 2. Finally, to enhance visibility, increase the marker size to 7. Now, let's shift our focus to the regional sales distribution by adding a map visual. Insert a map and assign city name to the location field, select actual to the bubble size, and include both parameter and variance text in the tooltips. Once again, rename the fields to maintain consistency and clarity. After that, open the Format pane to place the map at the bottom left, and at the same time, resize it to fit neatly within the layout. Then, increase the top padding to 5, and remove the background for a clean appearance. And turn off the title too. In the map setting, change the style to grayscale, which will help the data points stand out more clearly. To make the bubbles more visible, increase their size to 40 and set the color to yellow, ensuring they are easy to spot at a glance. Next, let's build the sales trends chart to track performance over time. Insert a line chart, then add fiscal month to x-axis. Parameter and select actual to y-axis. And include variance text in the tooltips. As always, rename the fields appropriately for clarity. Close the Build pane, then switch to the Format pane to adjust the chart's position and resize it for a better fit. Additionally, increase the top padding to 5 and disable the background for a cleaner look. Since we already have the section header, remove the chart title to avoid redundancy. For the x-axis, turn off the title. For the y-axis, disable both the value and title. For the legend, turn off the title. Under Lines setting, change the interpolation type to Step, which provides a clearer representation of data changes over time. For consistency across the dashboard, update the line colors of each series. Select Actual and set the color to black for strong contrast. For Budget, set the color to gray. For Forecast, first select the benchmark selector, then choose Forecast and set its line color to gray. Repeat these steps for last year to apply the color update. Finally, let's move on to the detailed view, where we'll create a chart to break down sales performance at a more granular level. Insert a clustered bar chart and add parameter 2 to y-axis. Then, for the x-axis, add select actual. Parameter 1. Variance line. Variance line 2. Variance label right. And variance label left. Once the data is assigned, adjust the chart size and position it neatly within the layout. Increase the top padding to 5 and remove the background for a clean design. Since the title isn't necessary, turn it off. Next, let's refine the axis settings. For the y-axis, turn off the title. And for the x-axis, disable both the values and title. Turn off the legend too. For better spacing and alignment, adjust the bar's layout by increasing the space between categories, enable overlap, and setting the space between series to 100%. Now, let's format the bars. Choose Select Actual under Series to set its bar color. For the remaining series, we'll make them invisible. Start by selecting the last year series and set its transparency to 100%. Repeat this process for the other benchmark series. First, use the benchmark selector to choose Budget, then select Budget under the series list and set its transparency to 100%. Do the same for Forecast, select it from the benchmark dropdown, then choose Forecast under the series and adjust the transparency to 100%. In addition to the benchmark series, we also want to hide any supporting series that aren't meant to be displayed. Select Variance Line from the series list and set its transparency to 100%. Repeat this step for Variance Line 2. Next, locate the Variance Label Right series and set its transparency to 100% as well. Finally, do the same for the Variance Label Left series. After that, activate the data labels. Choose the Select Actual series and format the values by setting the display units to millions and adjusting the decimal places to 2. As some series don't require data labels, start by selecting the Forecast series and turning off the Show for this series option. Then, repeat the process for both last year and budget by changing the benchmark selection accordingly for each and disabling their label display as well. Finally, do the same for the Variance Line and Variance Line 2 series by turning off the data labels for both. Now, let's format the variance labels. The Variance Label Right series represents positive variance. Adjust its position to outside end, update the value field to variance pos, reduce the font size to 8, and change the color to yellow so that all positive variance values are clearly highlighted in yellow. Then, set the display units to custom and apply the format code that displays values in millions with a plus sign. For the negative variance, we'll configure the Variance Label Left series. Adjust the position to inside end, enable overflow text, and set the value field to variance negative. Just like the positive variance labels, reduce the font size to 8, update its font color to red, and set the display units to custom with a format code that will display a minus sign. For the variance center line, insert a reference line. Click on Add Line. Rename it to Variance, and set the type to Constant Line. Modify the line value by clicking on FX, and for the field to base on, select Variance Line. Then, change the reference line color to gray. Set the transparency to 0. Choose a solid line style. Set the width to 1. And position to behind. To visually represent the variance direction, we'll use error bars. Start with the positive variance lines. Select the Variance Line series and enable it. Assign variance positive to the upper bound and set the relationship to relative. Then update the positive variance bar color to yellow. Set the width to 3 and remove the border by setting its size to 0. For the markers, change the shape to circle and size to 4. Now, let's set up the negative variance lines. Select Variance Line 2, enabled it, assign variance negative to the upper bound, and set the relationship to relative. Then, format the negative variance bar color to red. Set the width to 3, and remove the border. For the markers, once again, change the shape to circle and size to 4. With that, the detailed view is complete. Now that all visuals are in place, we'll configure the chart's interactions to enhance the dashboard's interactivity. Go to the Format ribbon and click Edit Interactions to activate this function. Start by modifying the bar chart, setting it to filter mode. Then, click on the bar chart and set its interaction to filter for the detailed view chart. Next, configure the map interaction. Click on the map and change its interaction to filter mode for both the bar chart and detailed view chart. For the line chart, apply the same logic. Click on the line chart and set its interaction to filter for the bar chart and detailed view chart. Once all the interactions are configured, click Edit Interaction again to exit the editing mode and finalize the settings. For the finishing touch, insert a text box to label the variance. Set the font size to 9, input the text variance. Highlight the text and align it to the center. Then, adjust the text color and fine-tune the text box by resizing and repositioning it. Finally, turn off the background to keep it seamless within the design. And with that, we've completed the step-by-step guide on building the sales team's dashboard from scratch. If you're looking for more dashboard tips and templates, be sure to check out my earlier videos. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.